Diana Rossini, and she has made some mistakes before, but she says Brian Thomas Jr. could be traded by the Jacksonville Jaguars as they are listening to trade offers. So they picked up the phone a few times. They've listened to calls for Jaguars star Brian Thomas Jr., obviously out of LSU, played with our quarterback Jayden Daniels. Today I'm going to talk about should the Washington Commanders try and trade for Brian Thomas Jr. and what would they have to trade for Brian Thomas Jr. Make sure you guys smash the like button on this video. Hit the subscribe button on the channel as well. If you are not subscribed, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to join this family. And then make sure you hit the hype button as well. So, Brian Thomas Jr. is a dog. And I was a loner last year and said, and again, I said he had a better year than Malik Nabers last year. Now, I do think Malik Nabers is the better receiver, but I think he was better than Malik Nabers last year coming out of the draft. He has 365 yards this year, 1 touchdown, and 27 receptions. He has had a drop issue this year, though, with Trevor Lawrence in the Jags. He's 6'2", 209 pounds, and he is a very good player, potential superstar in the NFL in the future. He has 114 receptions, 1,647 yards, 11 career touchdowns, and he has been balling for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he is their wide receiver 1. And again, he played with Jayden Daniels in college. Should the Washington Commanders trade for him? So, I think that there are certain situations where you almost have to try and trade for a guy. Now, we all know that Terry McLaurin, he's not going to be a Commander for much longer. Half the fan base hates him now, and I'm not one of those people, but half of the fan base hates him now. And I think half of the fan base really wants Terry gone. And so you could get Terry gone in this trade. You could trade Terry McLaurin for Brian Thomas Jr., and I don't know if the Jags would do that because Terry McLaurin is a better player than Brian Thomas Jr., but the age is where it is scary because he's, 30. And so the age is always the problem with Terry McLaurin. That's something I've learned. It's always a problem. And Terry McLaurin is more injury prone now that he's over the age of 30 with the soft tissue injuries missing time. However, he is back this Monday for the Commanders versus the Chiefs. But you could do some sort of trade like that. Or you could do, Daron Payne and somebody else for Brian Thomas Jr. There's many different trades you can make for Brian Thomas Jr. I think the Commanders should at least call the Jaguars, hey, what do you want for Brian Thomas Jr.? What are you looking for Brian Thomas Jr.? See what they're looking for. If it's way too much and you don't think you want to do that, then okay, you don't have to do it. But if it's something that is in the market, you should consider it because while you probably don't have the draft capital to do so, you're still in Jayden Daniels' rookie contract. You're still in it because Jayden Daniels, obviously still a rookie. Or not a rookie, sorry. He's still in that rookie contract. And so you have time to make the moves that you want to move and build this dynasty. You have the quarterback, which is the most important piece. And I talked about this offseason. You have the quarterback. That's the most important piece. Now it's time to add and build superstars around him. Why not try and bring in a guy that he's very familiar with, that he played with in college, and that is a superstar wide receiver in the NFL, or at least can be someday, that had 1,000 yards receiving last year, that has played with a pretty bad quarterback in Trevor Lawrence and has made it work. Why not try and go get him? Why not try and go make a move like this? I think this would be a fantastic move for the Washington Commanders to make. But again, what are you going to do? Like, you could just do Terry McLaurin for Brian Thomas Jr., right? You could do that. But I think it's going to be Terry McLaurin and something else. I don't think the Jags would just do straight up because, again, the age is the biggest problem for Terry McLaurin. But what I'm seeing all over the timeline is all of this Brian Thomas Jr. stuff for the Commanders. Everybody wants him, but you guys know that when the media wants him, that doesn't mean GM Adam Peters is even interested. Or maybe he's really interested. Maybe he was one of those calls. Maybe Adam Peters was already one of those calls. Maybe he has already made calls, and maybe he's been one of the Jags' first calls, right? You don't know. But I feel like good GMs are always looking to make moves, and the Jaguars are listening to calls, so why not at least call in for Brian Thomas Jr.? Now, is this move going to happen? Will the Commanders trade for Brian Thomas Jr.? No. It's probably a 5% chance this move happens. Will the Jaguars even trade Brian Thomas Jr. in general? That's probably a 10% chance of happening. Is this rumor from Diana Rossini true? That's probably 60%. I would say 60% that it's true. I would leave 40% that it isn't true, because she's wrong a lot of the time about her reports. I just wouldn't trust her. So maybe this all isn't true. Maybe this is all fake. Maybe this is like the Micah Parsons trade, where the Commanders really just have nothing to do with it. They don't want Micah Parsons. They don't want to trade for Micah Parsons. They don't want to have to give up assets for Micah Parsons, and they're never going to even try to trade for him. And he just went somewhere. He just went to the Packers, right? Maybe BTJ just goes somewhere else, and nobody hears a lick about him going to the Commanders. Maybe it's that situation. But if it isn't, again, I think you should call in for Brian Thomas Jr. and give the Jaguars GM, let him know, like, what do you want? Again, what do you want for Brian Thomas Jr.? What are you looking for in Brian Thomas Jr.? Let me know, and I will see what I can do. Again, if it's too much, I don't have to do anything. So, but this is a move that could really elevate your season. I mean, the trade deadline is not happening yet. It's not the trade deadline yet. So, I mean, if you go ahead and make this move, you trade for Brian Thomas Jr., and it depends on what you give up. But if you trade for Brian Thomas Jr. in season, that could really elevate this season. And he's a guy, again, he's been very, very good in his career so far in the NFL, and he looks, again, like a potential superstar. So if the Commanders were to trade for Brian Thomas Jr., no one would be mad. I assure you, no one would be mad. Because Jayden Daniels, again, this is a guy that he's very, very familiar with. We've had talks about Malik Nabers. This is sort of like a Malik Nabers. This is sort of like a Malik Nabers situation. That they are kind of the same player. And again, Jayden Daniels played with both of them. But is this move likely to happen? It's probably not likely to happen. And again, the draft capital, you probably don't have enough draft capital to do this move unless it's a player-on-player trade. So you just feel like this won't happen at all. But it is on the timeline a lot. I did want to address it. And it does feel like maybe it could happen. But if you don't trade for a wide receiver, you're going to have to draft one next year. The Commanders are going to have to draft someone next year. They're just going to have to. That's a fact. They're going to have to find someone and draft them next year at the wide receiver position. And it's not going to be a slot wide receiver. It's going to have to be an outside guy, kind of like what Terry is. Brian Thomas Jr. can be that if you want him to be that and if you want to trade for him. But again, that's probably not going to happen for this football team. But you definitely need a wide receiver. That is one of the up-and-coming positions on the Washington Commanders. You have to get a wide receiver soon because Terry McLaurin, he's getting older. Deebo Samuel, they might not re-sign him back after this year. Jalen Lane, that's a slot wide receiver, right? And yes, he has speed, but he's no Terry McLaurin replacement, right? Luke McCaffrey, he's never going to live up to the Terry McLaurin shoes. So either you select an LSU wide receiver right now and you trade for him, or you draft a LSU wide receiver, because those guys always work out. Or a Alabama receiver, right? One of those good receivers. So you gotta make your pick. Again, I would at least call in on Brian Thomas Jr. see what the situation is. Now, they might be asking for way more than Brian Thomas Jr. is, and you just decline it, and it all comes to an end. But I've been seeing Brian Thomas Jr. all over the timeline on X, so I did want to address this. That's going to do it for me right now, though. We did get confirmation that Deebo Samuel and Terry McLaurin will play this Monday versus the Chiefs. I made a live stream on that. Go check that out if you have not done so yet. Thank you for all your support. Make sure you subscribe, comment, and like. And that's going to do it for me right now. Hail to Washington Commanders. As always, you guys have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see if I have a video tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to make any content tomorrow. We will see. If there's any breaking news, I will, though. So that's going to do it for me. Peace.